What if the system you trusted turned against you? What if the courtroom, the very place built to uphold justice, became the stage where you were condemned before you even spoke? And what if the person everyone thought was the accused turned out to be the very man who fought hardest for the truth? Elias Carter had learned early in life that survival required more than hard work. It required resilience. Every morning before sunrise, he would lace up his scuffed shoes, iron his one good suit, and rehearse the words he wanted to live by. Justice isn't given. It's built. At 28, Elias was already known in his community as a rising star. A black man who had clawed his way up from the shadows of poverty, he was not just book-smart. He carried with him the weight of lived struggle, his mother's sacrifices, his father's absence, and the rough corners of a neighborhood long abandoned by the promises of equality. All of it forged him into someone who believed in more than just winning cases. He believed in restoring dignity, but dignity didn't pay rent, and it didn't erase the stares he got when he walked into the courthouse, stares that whispered he didn't belong. Elias's life was a careful balance of relentless work and quiet responsibility. During the day, he sharpened his arguments, studying cases until his eyes blurred. At night, he cared for his younger brother Marcus, a 17-year-old with big dreams but a fragile spirit. Their mother, long ill, spent her days in a modest nursing home across town, her hospital bills eating away at every paycheck Elias earned. He often skipped meals, pouring his money into medication and books for Marcus. Yet despite the exhaustion, Elias carried himself with quiet confidence. He was determined not just to survive the system, but to change it from within. The announcement came like lightning through his world. The state of Georgia was holding a landmark legal competition, a chance for young attorneys to argue before a panel of judges in a mock trial that could open doors to prestigious partnerships, mentorships, and perhaps even a place in the state prosecutor's office. For Elias, this wasn't just a competition. It was the one chance to break free from financial despair and gain a platform to advocate for his people truly. Winning could mean steady income, influence, and the ability to protect his community on a larger scale. Every waking moment, he prepared. His apartment floor was littered with legal texts, precedent cases, and scribbled notes. He practiced speeches in front of Marcus, who would grin and say, "Bro, you sound like you already won." But Elias knew the stakes. One missed step, one delay, one wrong impression, and it could all collapse. On the morning of the competition, dressed in his pressed suit and carrying his meticulously prepared files, Elias hurried through the crowded city square toward the courthouse. The air was heavy with the chatter of commuters, the honking of cabs, the rhythm of shoes against pavement. That's when he noticed her. An elderly black woman stood frozen at the center of the square, clutching a thick stack of documents that looked far too heavy for her trembling hands. Papers spilled onto the ground as strangers brushed past her without so much as a glance. Her face was marked with confusion, her eyes darting around as if searching for someone who cared. Elias slowed, torn between instinct and obligation. His watch ticked mercilessly. The competition was minutes away. If he missed his slot, the doors would close, no exceptions. Yet the sight of her stirred something profound in him. He saw his mother in her frail stance, his grandmother in her lost eyes. She was alone, unseen, discarded by a crowd too busy to notice. His chest tightened. "Keep walking," a voice inside urged. "This is your chance. You've worked for this moment. Please don't throw it away." But another voice, quieter, deeper, pressed against his conscience. What is the point of fighting for justice if you can't pause to live it? Elias clenched his jaw, looked once more at the looming courthouse in the distance, then back at the woman kneeling to collect her scattered papers. He took a sharp breath. His decision would define not only this day, but the course of his life. Elias stepped toward her. The courthouse clock struck the hour. The heavy doors were closing, and Elias, instead of running inside, knelt on the cold pavement to help the woman gather her fallen documents, unaware that this act of compassion was the true beginning of his trial. Long before Elias Carter stood at that courthouse square, before he became the man in the crisp suit clutching law books, he was just a boy staring at a cracked ceiling in a rundown apartment, dreaming of change. His passion for justice began not in a classroom, but in a dimly lit living room, where his mother would read him Bible verses and newspaper articles in the same breath. She often reminded him, "Baby, knowledge is your shield, and kindness is your sword. One without the other leaves you defenseless." At 12, Elias hacked together his first case, defending a friend accused of stealing candy at the corner store. He pulled out handwritten notes, demanded the shopkeeper consider evidence, and managed to prove the candy had fallen from another child's bag. That day, Elias tasted the power of words, logic, and courage. By high school, he was tutoring classmates, arguing passionately in debate clubs, and fixing neighbors' broken radios and phones in exchange for smiles rather than cash. He had no fancy computer, just second-hand parts and determination. His calling wasn't just law. It was problem-solving, lifting people where systems had failed. In the years that followed, Elias became known as the young man who gave more than he had. He translated legal letters for immigrants who couldn't understand English. He repaired an old laptop for a single mother struggling through online classes. He even skipped his own meals so Marcus could have enough food during exam weeks, yet he never boasted. To Elias, these weren't heroic gestures. They were responsibilities. He believed every person had a duty to their community, and though he carried a quiet anger at the injustices he saw daily, he brought an even louder hope. What Elias didn't know, as he bent down to help the older woman in the square, was that this wasn't a random moment. The woman, gray-haired, frail in appearance, her hands trembling with age, was none other than Margaret Whitfield, a retired judge and former CEO of a prestigious legal foundation. Behind her weathered eyes hid a sharp intellect and a mission. She had grown disillusioned with the endless parade of candidates who dazzled with credentials but lacked compassion. The system had enough brilliant lawyers who could quote statutes but couldn't see people. Margaret wanted something more. Someone more. So she devised her final test, to disguise herself as a vulnerable stranger and see who, if anyone, would stop. The thick documents she carried weren't random. They were blueprints for a justice initiative worth millions, a program to rebuild faith in communities long abandoned by fairness. Her act of disorientation was a performance, but her need for truth was absolute, and Elias, unknowingly, had just stepped into the heart of her trial. "Ma'am, let me help you with these," Elias said, crouching low as the papers fluttered in the breeze. His hands moved quickly, gathering sheets stamped with technical diagrams, court filings, and financial charts he couldn't fully make sense of. "Thank you, young man," she whispered, her voice quivering as though each word weighed a pound. "Everyone just walks past me." Elias glanced at the courthouse clock. His pulse quickened. He had only seconds left to make it inside, yet he stayed, steadying her shaking hands as she tried to lift the bundle. "Don't worry about them," he said softly. "Let's get you to a bench." He guided her carefully, ignoring the impatient honks of traffic and the cold stares of passers-by. Once seated, he knelt beside her. "Do you have someone I can call? Family, friend?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes flickering with subtle curiosity. Would he dump me here and leave? Or would he keep going? I'm not sure, she murmured, playing her part. "I think I lost my way. These papers, they're important. But I can't seem to hold them." Elias exhaled slowly. His chest tightened at the sight of her trembling hands. He pulled out his own briefcase, carefully tucking her documents inside to keep them safe. "Don't worry. I'll carry them." "Where do you need to go?" Her eyes softened. "The courthouse." "I think, the courthouse. The very place he was supposed to be. But not like this." Step by step, Elias walked beside her, matching his pace to her slow shuffle. The courthouse loomed closer, its heavy doors threatening to close. His throat went dry, but his grip on the documents tightened. Inside, ushers were locking the entrance to the competition room. Elias's name was being called unanswered. Competitors smirked as his chair sat empty. Judges marked his absence. The opportunity of a lifetime slipped silently away. And still, Elias stayed with the woman. When they finally reached the front steps, she paused, breathing heavily. Elias steadied her with both hands. "Take your time. We'll get there together." In that moment, it wasn't about the competition, the career, or the dream he had nurtured for years. It was about living the values he claimed to fight for. Justice wasn't a trophy. It was an action. As Elias guided Margaret to a quieter hall inside the courthouse, she studied him with sharp eyes behind her fragile mask. He hadn't once asked, "What do I get out of this?" He hadn't rushed, snapped, or blamed her for his delay. His kindness was instinct, not performance. Margaret knew then Elias Carter was different. He wasn't just another ambitious attorney clawing for power. He was the kind of man who would sacrifice opportunity for humanity, and that was rarer than any law degree. By the time Elias realized the competition was over, it was too late. His chance was gone. Yet, sitting beside the woman he had helped, his heart was strangely calm. He didn't know it, but his actual test had only just begun, and someone powerful had been watching every step. The echo of the courthouse clock still rang in Elias's ears long after the doors slammed shut. He sat on a wooden bench in the hallway, the older woman resting beside him, her stack of papers now neatly organized inside his briefcase. A sinking hollowness filled his chest. That seat in the competition room, his seat, had gone empty. His name had been called, then crossed out. He imagined the smirks of rival candidates, the judges shaking their heads, the opportunity evaporating like mist. All the weeks of preparation, all the sleepless nights, the hope of lifting his family from struggle, gone. All because he'd chosen compassion over ambition. Elias tried to remind himself of the principle his mother had raised him with. Better to lose with integrity than win without it. But the sting was sharp, the regret real. He walked the woman to a waiting area, making sure she was comfortable. She gave him a small, almost knowing smile, but said little. He excused himself politely, carrying the weight of defeat as he stepped back into the cool evening air. That night, Elias sat at the rickety kitchen table of his small apartment. Marcus leaned against the counter, chewing on a sandwich. "So, how did it go?" his younger brother asked, eyes glowing with expectation. Elias hesitated, swallowing hard. "I didn't make it." "What?" Marcus's voice cracked. "But you've been grinding for weeks. You knew every detail of that case." "I ran into someone who needed help," Elias admitted quietly. "By the time I got there, it was over." Marcus threw his hands up. "Man, we needed this. Mom's bills, rent, everything. And you just missed it?" His voice trembled with both anger and disappointment. Elias looked down, shame burning through him. He wanted to explain, to make Marcus understand. But how do you tell a 17-year-old that sometimes kindness costs you everything and still hope he believes it's worth it? That night, Elias lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Doubt gnawed at him. Had he made the right choice? Or had he doomed his family by following his heart instead of his head? The next afternoon, as Elias dragged himself home from the library, he noticed something unusual. Propped against his front door was an ivory-colored envelope embossed with a golden seal. His name, Mr. Elias Carter, was written in elegant script. He tore it open. Inside was a single card. "Your presence is requested. 10 a.m. tomorrow, 45 Whitfield Avenue. Come prepared." No signature. No explanation. Only an address. Elias frowned, suspicion twisting in his gut. Who would send him such a thing? He tucked the card into his jacket, unsure if it was a cruel prank or a strange opportunity. Before he could dwell too long, a sleek black sedan pulled up outside his building that very evening. Its polished surface gleamed under the streetlights, so out of place against the chipped paint and broken sidewalks of his neighborhood. The driver stepped out, a tall man in a tailored suit carrying a briefcase. He approached Elias with practiced precision. "Mr. Carter?" Elias nodded warily. "I represent the Whitfield Foundation," the man said, handing over a business card. "My employer asked me to deliver this personally." Elias blinked. "The Whitfield Foundation?" He'd heard of it. a powerhouse legal organization known for funding justice reform projects. The man adjusted his tie. I believe you assisted an elderly woman yesterday in the courthouse square? Elias's heart skipped. Yes, she needed help. The man gave a faint smile, one that held more meaning than he revealed. Indeed, that woman was Judge Margaret Whitfield, former CEO of this foundation. She was very impressed by you. Elias staggered back a step, his mind reeling. Judge Whitfield? The Judge Whitfield? The representative's tone shifted, becoming formal, almost ceremonial. You may feel you lost your chance yesterday, Mr. Carter. In truth, you passed the only test that mattered. Elias shook his head, struggling to process. What are you talking about? I missed the competition. I threw it all away. No, the man replied firmly. The competition was never the true measure. Judge Whitfield staged that scenario deliberately. She wanted to know who among the candidates valued humanity over ambition. You were the only one who stopped. Elias's mouth went dry. He thought of Marcus, of the nights he'd questioned himself about the woman's frail smile. You mean, he whispered, she tricked me? The representative's eyes softened. She tested you. The law needs more than sharp minds, Mr. Carter. It needs hearts that refuse to compromise integrity. Judge Whitfield believes you are such a man. Elias's emotions churned. Relief, disbelief, even a flicker of betrayal. All his preparation, all his sacrifice, brushed aside as though it had been a theater. Yet beneath the sting lay a growing flame of something else. Hope. The man handed him a sealed folder. Inside, you'll find details. Judge Whitfield requests your presence tomorrow at the address given. She wishes to discuss a matter of significant importance. Elias stared at the folder, the weight of it heavy in his hands. He glanced back at the sedan, then at his crumbling apartment building, two worlds colliding in one moment. As the car drove away, Elias stood frozen on the steps, the wind tugging at his jacket. Yesterday, he thought he had lost everything. Tonight, he realized he might have gained something far greater, though he didn't yet understand what. Elias clutched the folder against his chest, his pulse racing. Tomorrow, he would walk through doors he never imagined opening. But was this truly his redemption? Or the beginning of a test even harder than the last? The morning sun glinted off the polished windows of 45 Whitfield Avenue. Elias stood at the base of the towering building, clutching the ivory card like it was a lifeline. His thrift store suit felt painfully out of place among the sea of executives in tailored attire streaming through the glass doors. Don't look down, he muttered to himself. Walk in like you belong. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral of marble and steel, with walls lined by portraits of past legal giants. A receptionist in a crisp blazer looked up and smiled. Mr. Carter? They're expecting you. Expecting him. The word sent a shiver through his chest. An elevator whisked him to the top floor. When the doors opened, Judge Margaret Whitfield herself stood waiting. No longer hunched or trembling, she radiated an aura of authority. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, her eyes sharp, her presence commanding. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice steady. Thank you for coming. Elias swallowed. Judge Whitfield, Come, she interrupted gently, leading him into a vast boardroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the room with light, illuminating a long table stacked with files, charts, and architectural blueprints. Judge Whitfield gestured for Elias to sit. She placed a heavy folder in front of him and opened it. Inside were diagrams of community centers, legal aid clinics, and digital platforms designed to connect underserved neighborhoods with education, jobs, and affordable housing. This, she said, tapping the schematic, is Project JusticeNet. Elias leaned forward, scanning the pages. It's like a hub, a network to connect resources to people who need them most. Whitfield nodded. For decades, the system has failed communities like yours. Courts hand out punishment, not solutions. Politicians speak of reform, but deliver nothing. I'm done watching from the sidelines. This initiative will change that. But to succeed, it needs leadership. Someone who understands the struggle not from textbooks, but from lived experience. Elias blinked, trying to steady his breathing. And you think that's me? I don't think, she said firmly. I know. Elias's mind swirled. But I'm just starting. I don't have the connections, the degrees from Ivy League schools. Why me? Whitfield folded her hands. Because you've already proven what no resume can. Yesterday, you sacrificed ambition for compassion. That choice told me everything. You are the type of leader this project needs. Someone who won't trade humanity for applause. She leaned closer, her eyes unflinching. I don't want you as an employee, Mr. Carter. I want you as a partner. Together, we will build a movement that reshapes how justice touches the lives of ordinary people. The words hit him like thunder. A partner, not a pawn, not an assistant. A partner. Whitfield slid another document toward him, a contract outlining his role, co-director of Project JusticeNet. But alongside the promise of power came staggering responsibility. This isn't a prize, she warned. It's a burden. You'll be the face of this initiative. You'll fight opposition from politicians, corporations, and even the very courts you once idolized. You'll be tested daily, and the weight of an entire community's hope will rest on your shoulders. Elias's hands trembled as he scanned the words. The zeros on the funding line alone made his head spin, but the thought of being entrusted with something so massive both exhilarated and terrified him. What if I fail? He whispered. Whitfield's gaze softened. Then fail fighting for something that matters. That's all anyone can ask. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking of the grand clock on the wall. Elias thought of Marcus, of his mother's weary smile, of neighbors trapped in cycles of poverty and despair. He thought of the courtroom he'd missed, the opportunity that had slipped away because he chose to help a stranger. And now he understood. It hadn't been a loss. It had been the doorway to something greater. Elias closed the folder and met Whitfield's gaze. If you believe I'm the right person, then I accept. Not for me, for them. A rare smile curved Whitfield's lips. She extended her hand. Then let's begin. As Elias shook her hand, the city skyline stretched out behind them, gleaming, unaware of the revolution about to begin. The boy who once defended a friend over stolen candy was now stepping into a fight that could redefine justice for generations. Elias's apartment became a war room overnight. The kitchen table, once cluttered with ramen bowls and unopened mail, was now buried under stacks of legal documents, blueprints, and scribbled notes. Marcus sat across from him, eyes wide with disbelief. Bro, yesterday you were stressing about rent. Today you're co-director of something called JusticeNet? Elias chuckled nervously. Yeah, I'm still trying to believe it myself. Marcus leaned forward. So what's the play? The play, Elias said, tapping the map of their neighborhood, is to start small. A pilot center here right in the heart of where we grew up. If we can prove it works here, we can expand citywide. But launching JusticeNet wasn't as simple as printing flyers. The community had learned to distrust anything that smelled like politics or false promises. Years of broken pledges had hardened people's hearts. At the first town hall, Elias stood on a creaky wooden stage inside the local rec center. Rows of folding chairs were filled with wary faces, mothers clutching children, fathers with calloused hands, elders whose eyes carried decades of disappointment. A man from the crowd shouted, "Another program? Another suit telling us he's got the answers? What makes you different?" Elias didn't dodge. He stepped down from the stage, walked into the crowd, and said, "Because I was sitting where you are. I've been denied jobs because of my zip code. I've watched my mom work double shifts to cover a single bill. I know what it feels like to beg for help and get silence. JusticeNet isn't me telling you what to do. It's us building something together." The room went quiet. A few heads nodded. The seed of trust had been planted. 2 months later, a dusty, abandoned library reopened its doors as JusticeNet's first pilot center. Bright murals of unity and resilience covered the brick walls. Inside, volunteers worked late nights setting up computer labs, tutoring rooms, and legal aid clinics. On opening day, the line wrapped around the block. Kids raced to the new study rooms, parents signed up for job training workshops, and elderly residents asked about housing support. The energy was electric, like the neighborhood had taken its first breath in years. Judge Whitfield toured the facility, her expression uncharacteristically soft. "It's working," she whispered to Elias. But Elias shook his head. This is just the start. Real change is when these kids don't have to choose between survival and dreams. Not everyone was pleased. A week later, Elias's phone buzzed with an anonymous text. Stop what you're doing. Or else, corporate landlords saw JusticeNet as a threat to their control. Local politicians felt their power being undermined. And even some rival attorneys mocked Elias as the kid with fantasies of saving the world. One evening, he found graffiti on the center's door. Go back to begging, Carter, Marcus fumed. Man, they're scared. That means you're winning. Elias clenched his fists. It also means we need to move smarter. This isn't just about programs. It's about shifting power. And power fights back. Despite resistance, victories began to emerge. A single mother named Denise walked into the center, drowning in eviction notices. Within weeks, JusticeNet's legal team secured her housing rights and connected her with a stable job. For the first time in years, she told Elias, tears streaming down her face, I can breathe. A high schooler, Jamal, had been skipping classes and facing suspension. JusticeNet paired him with a mentor, helped him catch up, and enrolled him in a summer coding camp. Months later, Jamal stood in front of the community, proudly presenting his first mobile app. An elderly veteran received long-overdue benefits after JusticeNet's advocacy. He clasped Elias's hands and said, You're giving us back our dignity. Each story rippled across the neighborhood, fueling the belief that transformation wasn't just possible, it was happening. Media outlets soon caught wind of the movement. Reporters interviewed families outside the center. Headlines praised the grassroots justice revolution, and even national networks sent cameras to capture the story. Elias found himself at podiums, speaking not just as a lawyer but as a community leader. His words resonated. We don't need saviors from outside. We need tools, opportunities, and a seat at the table. JusticeNet isn't a charity. It's justice finally doing its job. But with visibility came bigger enemies. Wealthy developers and city officials held closed-door meetings to strategize against him. They couldn't allow a young black prosecutor from the projects to rewrite the rules of the game. One night, after another exhausting press conference, Elias sat in the darkened center. His tie hung loose, his eyes bloodshot. Judge Whitfield entered quietly, setting 2 cups of coffee on the table. You're burning yourself out, she said. Elias rubbed his temples. Every step forward feels like 2 steps back. They're trying to shut us down before we even begin. Whitfield studied him carefully. And yet here you sit, still fighting. That's the burden of vision. It demands everything, and then more. Elias stared at the wall covered in photos of smiling families who had walked through JusticeNet's doors. I just don't want to fail them, Whitfield's voice softened. Then don't fight alone. Lean on your people. This is bigger than you, Elias. Let them carry the weight with you. Outside, a storm rumbled over the city. Inside, the lights of JusticeNet glowed defiantly in the night, a beacon of hope and defiance. But unseen forces were already moving, plotting to crush what Elias had built, and the real battle had only begun. JusticeNet's success had become impossible to ignore. Families were stabilizing, kids were thriving, and the community buzzed with new energy. But the higher the program soared, the sharper the knives grew in the shadows. One evening, Elias sat in his office flipping through case files when Marcus burst in, breathless. They're coming for you, Eli. Elias looked up. Who? City Hall. They just announced a public hearing, an investigation into JusticeNet's funding. They're painting it as a misuse of taxpayer dollars. Elias closed his eyes, exhaling. He knew this was more than bureaucracy. This was war. The town hall overflowed. Cameras lined the back wall, journalists filled the aisles, and at the front sat a panel of stern-faced officials. The lead councilman, a man Elias knew had ties to developers, adjusted his glasses. Mr. Carter, he began, it has come to our attention that JusticeNet operates without proper financial oversight. Isn't it true you diverted funds meant for the city's general budget? Elias rose slowly, buttoning his suit jacket. He felt the eyes of his entire community on him. His mother sat in the second row, Marcus in the third. Kids from the pilot program clutched handmade signs, "Justice is for us." "With respect, Councilman," Elias said firmly, "JusticeNet isn't diverting funds. We're redirecting the opportunity. Every dollar is accounted for, and every program is transparent. If you want proof, I've brought the books." He handed over thick binders. The cameras zoomed in. The audience murmured. The councilman flushed but pressed on. "And what about your role as a prosecutor? Isn't there a conflict of interest?" Elias leaned forward. "My only conflict is with injustice. If helping my community rise is a crime, then call me guilty. But this," he gestured to the crowd, to the mothers, fathers, and children. "This is the city finally working for the people it forgot." The chamber erupted in applause. The council couldn't discredit his work, so they turned to discrediting him. The next morning, headlines screamed, "Prosecutor Carter under investigation for misconduct." Anonymous leaks claimed Elias had manipulated cases, taken bribes, and even fabricated charges. At home, Elias slammed the paper onto the table. "This is all lies," he growled. Marcus paced the room. "They don't care if it's true. They want doubt. They want to break your credibility." For the first time, Elias felt the ground shaking beneath him. If people believed the smear campaign, JusticeNet could crumble overnight. Days later, a protest formed outside the JusticeNet Center, not of supporters, but of angry citizens waving signs that read, "Fraud and shut it down." Someone had spread a rumor that JusticeNet's programs were secretly harvesting community data for profit. Elias stood at the door as the crowd jeered. He spotted Denise, the mother whose eviction he'd stopped, shouting back at the protesters, "He saved my family! Don't believe their lies!" But Elias could see the fear in the eyes of others. The trust he had worked so hard to build was slipping. That night, he sat alone in the darkened office, shoulders heavy. For the first time since this journey began, he whispered, "Maybe I should walk away." Judge Whitfield visited him the next morning. She found him staring at the JusticeNet mural, a painting of open hands lifting the city skyline. "You're thinking about quitting," she said flatly. Elias didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Do you remember why I chose you that day in the courtroom?" He looked at her. "Because I helped a stranger?" "No." Her eyes burned with intensity. "Because you chose courage when it cost you everything. That's the kind of strength this city has never seen before. If you quit now, you're not just walking away from JusticeNet. You're telling every kid out there that the world was right about them, that they'll never win." Her words pierced the fog in his mind. Elias straightened his shoulders. "Then we fight." The allegations escalated into a formal hearing. Elias was forced to stand trial in the very courthouse where he had once prosecuted criminals. The irony wasn't lost on him. Now he was the accused. The opposing lawyer, slick and venomous, painted Elias as a self-serving opportunist who used community pain as a ladder for his career. When it was Elias's turn, he rose, scanning the packed courtroom. He saw Denise, Jamal, the veteran, Marcus, all the people whose lives had been touched. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "I could stand here and defend myself with facts and numbers. But this isn't about me. It's about whether a community deserves to rise. The people sitting here today, they are not statistics. They are mothers who deserve safe homes, children who deserve a future, veterans who deserve dignity. If that makes me guilty, then so be it. But history will show we were on the side of justice." His words silenced the room. At the climax of the trial, Judge Whitfield, presiding over the case, made a startling move. She called a surprise witness. The retired CEO who had once tested Elias with that chance encounter years ago. She walked to the stand and said, "I gave Mr. Carter the same choice I've given countless candidates, ambition or compassion. He chose compassion, and it is that very quality this city is now trying to punish. Shame on us if we let lies destroy the one leader who's trying to heal what we broke." The courtroom gasped. Cameras flashed. The tide turned. After hours of deliberation, the gavel struck. "The court finds Mr. Elias Carter." "Not guilty on all counts," cheers erupted. Supporters embraced. Denise wept openly. Marcus nearly lifted Elias off the ground, but Elias stood still, tears burning his eyes. He realized this wasn't just a personal victory. This was a declaration. The community had a voice, and no smear campaign could silence it. In the days following the acquittal, messages poured in. Universities offered Elias honorary degrees. National organizations invited him to lead initiatives. Even international NGOs called, asking him to expand JusticeNet abroad. But Elias declined most of them. Standing in the JusticeNet Center, surrounded by murals and laughter, he told Marcus, "This is where it started. This is where it stays. If we can fix home, we can fix anywhere," Marcus grinned. Spoken like a man who knows where he belongs. Yet as Elias celebrated, a news alert flashed across the television. State government proposes legislation to defund grassroots legal aid programs. Marcus muttered, "They're coming again." Elias stared at the screen, jaw tight. The battle wasn't over. It had only evolved, and this time he would be ready. The camera lens lingers on Elias's face as the cheering in the courtroom fades into silence. Then slowly the focus shifts. The narrator's voice breaks through. Steady, warm, and personal. Maybe you've followed Elias's journey and thought, that could never happen to me. But the truth is, it already has. Not in the headlines, not in the courtroom, but in the quiet moments where your choices shape the world around you. Think about it. Who is the Elias in your community? The one working quietly, unnoticed, doing the right thing when no one else is watching? Maybe it's a teacher who stays late to tutor kids. Maybe it's a neighbor who brings food to an elderly couple. Maybe it's you. The words hang in the air, heavy with invitation. What test are you walking into right now without even realizing it? Maybe it won't look like a high-stakes courtroom or a citywide movement. Maybe it's as small as helping a stranger carry groceries, standing up for a friend when others stay silent, or refusing to compromise your integrity when it would be easier to look away. Images of ordinary people flash across the screen. A teenager helping an older man cross the street. A woman comforting a crying child. A man defending someone being harassed. Every day is an act of courage, strung together like pearls. You see, kindness isn't transactional. It isn't about what you get in return. It's an investment in a better world. And the return is often greater than anything you can imagine. Elias didn't know that stopping to help a stranger would change the course of his life. He just chose to care. And that choice transformed everything. The narrator pauses, then leans into the urgency. So here's my challenge for you. Before the day ends, perform one act of unexpected kindness. Please don't post it. Don't brag about it, just do it. And watch how it changes not only the person you help, but you as well. The closing line lands like a heartbeat. The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more people willing to stop, willing to see, and willing to care, because the smallest act of kindness can set off the biggest revolution. And the next Elias? The next spark of justice? It might just begin with you.